so. Sometimes personality's totally different. Yeah.
Can you make an announcement?
Go ahead. Because we're showing 9:30 right now.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you please grab your seats so we can get started? I'd like to ask the mayoral candidates who will be up here at the table to please sit on my left-hand side on the second row here so you can enter the stage easily. Sorry that you can't bring your coffee with you today, but strict rules. But we appreciate you being here. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes.
Ready? Okay. Hello there. Welcome to the Mayoral Candidate Forum of Plan Houston. We're starting here at promptly 9:30 because we are actually live on public media, which is Comcast 17, UVerse 99, and streamed on hmstv.org. I'm Joe Webb. I chair Blueprint Houston. I want to thank all of you for coming to this important discussion about Houston's future. I also want to thank our distinguished co-sponsors. They're listed on the screen behind me, and to Nightingale Interpreting for donating their American Sign Language services for the deaf today. As many of you know, Blueprint Houston, along with many of our co-sponsors, has been an advocate for a general plan for the city of Houston for 15 years, with dozens of public meetings, 3 citizens' congresses to engage you, the citizens, in describing Houston's visions, values, and goals. About a year and a half ago, Blueprint Houston met with Mayor Annise Parker, offering to provide at our expense consultants to work with city planning to determine what the city has in the way of plans, what was missing, and how it can all be worked together into a general plan. She agreed, and we then engaged Peter Park, who was a distinguished urban planner, to work with the mayor's office, city departments, and the citizens to develop the plan to plan. Houston Endowment made a significant contribution to us for that initiative, and other civic organizations also provided funding. It was truly a collaborative community effort. Today, we're beginning to examining how Mayor Parker, Patrick Welch, Director of Planning and Development, consultants, city departments, and citizen committees have built on that plan to develop this first stage of the general plan for the city of Houston. You'll see Plan Houston encompass vision, goals, strategies with their action items. And most importantly today, we also get to understand how the candidates perceive they can and will implement Plan Houston in their administrations. Guy Hagstedt, a Blueprint Houston board member and a member of the steering committee of Plan Houston, will outline some of the challenges and the opportunities facing us today that relate to that call for action. He'll be followed by our moderator, Craig Cohen of Houston Public Radio and host of Houston Matters, who will introduce the candidates and bring them to the stage. Our first discussion with the candidates will center on the key challenges and opportunities that have been presented. And then later, Guy will come back up to the stage and give us a brief overview of Plan Houston, setting up the discussion for our second round of discussion with the candidates, focusing on how Plan Houston can be implemented to address the issues we face as a city and as they will as mayor. There will be opportunity for questions from the audience towards the end of the forum, and you'll see volunteers during the talk standing in the aisles with cards and pencils. So just raise your hand if you'd like to have that and submit a question to be given to the candidates later. And now let's take a look at where we are. Guy.
Thank you, Joe. I also want to welcome Blueprint Houston's mayoral candidate forum on planning issues and on the recently unveiled Plan Houston. Thank you for attending, and thank you to our many co-sponsors, which are all organizations that share our concerns about how our city will manage the many challenges and opportunities that will come with strong and persistent growth in the future. This brief presentation will introduce some key issues facing Houston that will be the starting point for our discussion with the candidates. Even with variable economic conditions, the Houston region expects strong and persistent growth for the next several decades. The 8-county metropolitan area is projected to grow from about 6 million to about 10 million in 2040. The city of Houston will grow from about 2.2 million to 3 million in the same time period, which will be about 20% of the region's growth. As a result, Houston will claim a steadily diminishing share of the region's population and growth. While growth has been strong, it has also been uneven. The orange and red on the map show the geographic distribution of high growth areas, or hotspots, and the green line is the Houston city limits. The hotspots generally correspond to wealthier and more desirable neighborhoods, and many are outside of Houston. You can clearly read the Addicks and Barker reservoirs, where there is only gray, just inside Houston on the left or west. Hotspots beyond the reservoirs are along the Grand Parkway, such as Cinco Ranch, Bridgeland, and Katy. Hotspots to the southwest are Missouri City and Sugar Land, and to the south, Pearland. But Houston is experiencing new development as well, and it tends to locate in more affluent areas where it can create conflicts if the development is out of scale and character with the surrounding area. Meanwhile, large areas of the city have seen virtually no new development and are starved for investment. The housing stock is old and getting older. These areas also correspond to food deserts, where there's not a decent grocery store anywhere nearby, and poor access to other services like healthcare. Traffic is mentioned consistently as one of our biggest concerns. Despite what seems to be constant construction, we can't seem to keep up with the increase in traffic, which simply results in more congestion. According to a recent study by the Texas Transportation Institute, the average Houstonian wastes over 60 hours per year in traffic, with its attendant cost in fuel and stress. By now, even highway advocates recognize that we cannot build our way out of congestion, although we seem to keep on trying. According to the Kinder Institute's Houston Area Survey, there is consistent support for mass transit and for spending on transit instead of highways. Interestingly, an overwhelming majority of these same respondents do not use transit themselves, and as indicated by the red graph on the right. This could be for many reasons, including that there's not good access to transit where they live and work. And of course, these results are prior to Metro's reimagined bus network and additional light rail lines. The Kinder Institute has also been tracking preferences for denser, more urban and walkable residential areas. The graph compares results from 2008 to 2012. Blue is a preference for a single-family home with a big yard and a drive to most basic needs, and green is a preference for a smaller home in a more urbanized setting within walking distance of basic needs. There has been a steady increase in the preference for walkable urbanism, which surpassed 50% for Harris County and 62% for the city of Houston in 2012. But walkable urbanism is about more than just density. There's plenty of density in the picture on the right, but a total lack of street life. And then you have the scene on the left. There's no question which arrangement people prefer, but mostly we get the image on the right. Getting what we want means concentrating on the qualitative aspects of development, complete streets designed for more than just cars, an active and lively mix of uses, and an inviting and attractive pedestrian realm. Finally, we come to the issue of building and maintaining infrastructure, which is one of the most basic functions of municipal government. Several of the candidates have made a point of talking about the deplorable condition of our streets, and each of us can cite our own pet peeves. Flooding has also become almost routine. Street flooding brings traffic to a standstill and causes significant disruptions. Heavier rainfalls flood homes and businesses and neighborhoods that have seldom flooded in the past. Our water and sewer systems also are not being replaced fast enough to prevent deterioration and failures. Before concluding this overview, we also must acknowledge that we are facing significant fiscal problems as well. The different assumptions for revenues and expenditures in a recent city controller's report all point down, meaning all scenarios predict more fiscal challenges in the future. Yes, the city balances its budget every year, but it does so by deferring payments, restructuring debts, selling assets, and through various accounting techniques. At this point, we have kicked the proverbial can to the end of a pothole-filled road. This fiscal situation is serious, but the city still must serve a growing population and compete for talent in a global marketplace. In summary, we expect continued and persistent growth, corresponding growing pains, and fiscal challenges, along with some real opportunities such as an expanding preference for urban living. As we begin the first discussion, let's look ahead to the second part of our agenda and to one of the principal purposes of this mayoral forum, Plan Houston, Houston's first general plan, which is being considered by City Council right now. As we will see, Plan Houston is the first step in an ongoing process that is similar to the strategic planning common in the business world. As we explore these issues, we urge our candidates to consider how Plan Houston can help to inform and resolve these issues over time, and how you, as mayor, would address them. With that, I will turn the floor over to Craig Cohen, who will kick off our discussion with the candidates.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming out here today. We appreciate it. This morning, you're going to hear some opening statements from the candidates, followed by a period of discussion surrounding four major categories: growth and development, neighborhoods and housing, transportation and mobility, and infrastructure and services. Not surprisingly, what you kind of heard a little bit about in the overview there. We'll then have another presentation, then discuss implementation of the general plan. With the time remaining, we will then run through some questions from all of you. As you heard earlier, there are cards down front here and pencils, and folks are walking around with them. So just raise your hand if you want to ask a question. They'll come around with it. You can write it, and they'll deliver them up to me. As 8 candidates have met organizers' criteria to appear today, there will not be time to ask every candidate every question. I don't think you want that either, right? Instead, I will make an effort to ensure that each candidate has the opportunity to speak and that no candidate dominates the conversation above all others. That said, in the interest of staying on topic and accomplishing as much as we can this morning, I may gently guide candidates from time to time, ask follow-ups, or refocus the discussion. And we do have a set amount of time allotted for each subject, so if I say it's time to move on, it's because it's time to move on. Fair enough? And with that, please welcome our mayoral candidates to the stage, and we will welcome them in alphabetical order, beginning with Chris Bell, Steve Costello, Adrian Garcia, Ben Hall, Bill King, Victoria Lane, Marty McVeigh, and Sylvester Turner. Please welcome them all to the stage. Good morning. How are you? Well, how are you? All right. Candidates, you've just seen a brief presentation of some key issues and challenges that Houston faces in its future. Understanding that there are always financial constraints for any big city, we'd like you to begin with an opening statement sharing your vision for how Houston can respond to these challenges. And we will again start in alphabetical order with Chris Bell.
Good morning, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. I'm Chris Bell, and I would like to be your next mayor. I had the privilege of representing you as an at-large member of the Houston City Council and as a member of the United States Congress. And I'm running for mayor because I think that the city of Houston is perfectly positioned to move to the next level and to not only be the fourth largest city, but to actually start acting like the fourth largest city. We're already a world-class city, but we need to fully embrace the amazing advancements in technology. I think that will allow us to run a more responsive government and a much more efficient government. And we're also going to have to get our arms around the financial challenges that we face. We have a revenue cap here in the city of Houston, and it's strangling the city. I'm the only candidate up here who has called for a repeal of the revenue cap because I think it is horrible public policy and is doing very little for the average homeowner. We're also going to have to address our pension situation, and we'll probably have an opportunity to do that today. I'm trying to run an idea-based campaign. It's very forward-thinking, and I look forward to being able to discuss my ideas with you here this morning. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much. Steve Costello.
Good morning. I'm your at-large council member, Steve Costello, and I'm respectfully here asking for your support as mayor of the city of Houston. I am an engineer and a successful business owner. I created a company back in 1991 that currently employs over 150 people, and the firm has been recognized 5 times as the best place to work in the city of Houston. And I'm an at-large council member. The issues that I think that are facing the city today relate to some of the topics that we're going to be discussing today, specifically infrastructure, our road and street conditions, the safety of our community. There are many of our people in our city that don't believe they're safe, and the financial situation that the city is facing today, particularly in pensions. And my plan for resolving the pension systems will be able to address some of those issues, as well as help us fund some of the other challenges and goals and strategies that we have to deal with when we have a discussion about the general plan. I'm your at-large council member. I know the issues facing the city, and I look forward to having that discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Adrian Garcia.
Good morning, and it's my honor to be here. I'm Adrian Garcia, and I want to be your mayor. I want to be your mayor because I recall the day that Peter Brown was advocating for a plan. Well, we have a plan. We just now need to work together to get it passed. A plan's good for Houston. It helps us know where we've been and where we want to get to. Understanding all of this data that has been presented to you is an incredible set of information that will help us plan our future. And there's nothing wrong with planning. Every one of us do it every single day. The minute we get up, we start planning our day. And there's no reason why the mayor of Houston shouldn't be planning the future of the city of Houston. I look forward to working with you because as the mayor of all of Houston, we'll use this information and this framework of citizens participating to help guide the growth and the future of our city as a way to ensure that we will maintain our place at the top of the pile of the cities in America. But at the top because we're great, because we understand how to deal with mobility, and because we understand how to deal with growth. I'm Adrian Garcia, and I want to be your mayor.
Thank you very much. Ben Hall.
Good morning, I'm Ben Hall. I was the former city attorney for the city of Houston. I actually wrote the laws for the city for about 3 years under Bob Lanier. I know how wonderful the city can provide services, and I know how the city can get in the way of the private sector. What we have at City Hall are challenges, fiscal challenges that we can address, but we don't need to address them as Chris is suggesting by raising your taxes. We actually have some savings and efficiencies that we will achieve under a Ben Hall administration, but more importantly, we have about $134 million of TERS dollars that I intend to return back to the general fund without crippling the exercises and the projects that have already been committed by those TERS. Let me say this. Quality of life issues are important in the city of Houston. In addition to the fiscal constraints and issues that we have to address, we'll be able to do both under a Ben Hall administration. I'm Ben Hall, and I'm asking for your vote.
Candidates, you're doing a terrific job so far on keeping to 1 minute. Thank you for that. Bill King.
So I had an experience in my life where there wasn't a plan. When I was the mayor of Kemah, we didn't have a plan to evacuate this area, and I talked about that some and pretty much was told I didn't know what I was talking about. And then we had that awful Rita evacuation where we killed 130 people in the evacuation, which was more people than had ever died from a hurricane, except for the 1900 storm. So it's very important to have a plan, but I think it's also got to be specific. And what we don't have today, we don't have a plan for what we're going to do for our infrastructure, which is crumbling, falling down around our ears. We don't have a plan for what our financial model going is for. We particularly don't have a plan for what we're going to do with these pension liabilities. We don't have a plan for what we're going to do to start actually catching criminals. Last year, our police department only caught 6% of the burglars that were committed in this city. That's not acceptable to most people in this city, and it's going to destroy neighborhoods if we don't address these very basic issues the city's facing.
Thank you very much. Victoria Lane.
My name is Victoria Lane, and the first thing I do once I become a mayor is I don't have much experience as a politician, but the fact is we have to put God first in our city and stop the corruption and stop the crooks. We need to find the money so we can fix all the roads, the streets, because without the money, you can't hardly fix anything. We need the money to fix all the problems that we have in the city of Houston. We also have a problem in our, when it rains, it floods so much, like what we just showed in the projector earlier. So we need to make a difference by fixing all this problem, and also find the money where all these government agencies are hiding. They're doing it the Enron way. They're mismanaging the money. So once I become mayor, that's the first thing I'll do so we can fix all the problem in the city of Houston.
Thank you very much. Marty McVeigh.
Good morning. My name's Marty McVeigh, and I'm a businessman here in Houston. And I came to Houston for some of the same reasons that you came to Houston, for opportunity. And I want to make sure that every Houstonian has the same opportunities that I had when I came to Houston. And to do that, you're going to hear this word over and over again today, is plan. We do have to have a plan. I've advocated for a plan throughout my campaign. And a plan is this, as you all may understand this. It's got to be all-encompassing. We must include every city department. We must include every city function. We must include external functions like our economy, like growing in a smart way, looking at things that are going on around the world, like the the Panama Canal expansion and other things, to see what is our real future, and it must be all-encompassing. We must be very proactive in recruitment of new businesses to come to Houston, manufacturing and technology in particular. We must grow our economy as well as our city.
All right, thank you very much. Sylvester Turner.
Thank you. Growing city, growing region, the most diverse city in the country. We need complete neighborhoods, we need complete streets. We have to take care of the fundamentals as we segue for the future. Infrastructure, financial management, public safety, those are fundamentals. But at the same time, we are a growing city with a high income inequality. You can't have two cities in one. All neighborhoods are important, and all neighborhoods should be attended to. Yes, we need planning, but it must be methodical and it must be responsible. And we can't wait and do it 2 or 3 months before a budget is worked out. This is step one. The question is, what will step 2, step 3 be? In the 90s, we made some decisions that are impacting us today. We built the Grand Parkway, and the growth is taking place outside the Grand Parkway. The critical question is, what decisions are we going to make today that will impact us positively for the future? Let's build a city for the middle class, and therefore, if we do that, we can lift those who are at the bottom, we can provide a city for those at the top.
All right, thank you very much. Candidates, as we get into this next section, as I said, I'm going to pose some questions to individual candidates, but I encourage the rest of you, if you want to speak up in response, the initial candidate will have about a minute to respond, and then you'll have about 30 seconds or so to chime in, and we really do encourage that, and then I'll cut you off when we really need to move on. Let's begin with a little bit of discussion about growth and development, and I want to start with Adrian Garcia. We heard again last week projections suggesting Houston may overtake Chicago in city population in the coming decade. What can the city of Houston do to get ready for that and the increased density that comes with it?
Well, we have to start doing it now and ensuring that we pass this plan, a good general plan that provides a framework for us to predict our growth. But we also have to begin to make those accommodations as it relates to bringing developers closer into the process, having that dialogue so that we understand the type of development that's going to sustain the growth and absorb the growth that's going to be coming our way. There's no way we can stand by knowing that that growth is coming do nothing and allow that growth to go outside the city, because then it'll put our sustainability in harm's way. And so my process and my approach would be to have this group of stakeholders and others at the table on a regular basis, adopting this plan and applying it to the budgetary process, making sure that Metro is paying attention to it, that all things are aligned so that we are effectively working together to plan the growth that we know is ultimately coming our way. We have to think about mobility. We have to think about transit-oriented development. These are some of the things that we have to pay attention to.
Okay, so communication is important, thinking about mobility and transportation. Anybody have any thoughts on any of that? Steve Costello.
Well, I think the biggest challenge that we have is that the city historically has always been reactive to development rather than being proactive. A lot of that is due to the financial challenges that the city has. And I've always felt that investment in communities has to do with the infrastructure. And so we need to figure out a way to allocate investments in the older neighborhoods first, but have set aside monies to encourage investments in advance of development. And the other issue is that we don't have zoning. So the way we regulate development is through the Chapter 42 development ordinance. And if anyone has spent some time reading the ordinance, it's laborious, it's very hard to follow. And we need to take another fresher look to make sure that that's user-friendly.
All right, Chris Bell, you wanted to chime in?
Well, mobility is the biggest challenge with that many more people coming in here. And as the PowerPoint accurately pointed out, we're not going to be able to widen the roadways enough to accommodate that many cars. And so it would be foolish to talk about trying to build the most modern city in the country without actually talking about a real mass transit plan. And I'm optimistic because I think bus rapid transit provides an affordable alternative in the future that will be an effective compromise for serving some of these underserved corridors and giving people a chance to get from point A to point B faster, and I think they'll take advantage of it.
Marty McVeigh.
Well, you know, you got to look at the reason for the growth as a place to start. Why do you think we're going to experience growth? It's because of the economy. And if we don't get our hands around and control the future of our economy, then that growth is not going to happen. Or the growth will be not smart growth. And that's the reality. I mean, people come here to this city, like I said earlier, for the same reasons, for opportunities. Businesses come here, people come here. If the opportunities don't exist and we don't have real economic development in our plan, then we are setting ourselves up for disaster.
All right, let me ask Sylvester Turner, as you respond to that, I also want you to comment on, it's sort of a dual-edged sword, isn't it? That we want economic growth, but with economic growth comes more people, more density, more traffic, more all of this, right?
Absolutely correct. But at the same time, I think we have to bear in mind with more people coming, we have to build out the entire city. Not just in certain districts. We have 640 square miles. You have to provide it. You have to make the entire 640 square miles attractive so that people don't feel like they simply have to concentrate in one or two areas where you have quality of life issues, where you have transit, where you have those things, the TERS and those things. The entire 640 square miles are critically important, which means that you have to have infrastructure, you have to have retail, you have to build an urban walkable the city so that when people are looking out, they just don't see that we have good quality schools and good streets and good quality of life issues just in one sector, but in the entire city.
All right, well, let me follow up on that, the notion of the entire city. What about the notion that any kind of growth and development can potentially change the character and identity of a given neighborhood?
Well, you don't want to lose that. Communities want the growth, we want the improvements, but you also want to protect the character and the integrity and the culture of these communities and of these neighborhoods. That is what leads to the vibrancy and makes our city so dynamic. So we can have those improvements, but it has to be methodical. You have to work with community groups, with the super neighborhoods. You have to build a community with those neighborhoods in mind. You can't just have the developers build it over here and then try to impose it on neighborhoods. They have to work hand in hand.
Ben Hall, if you were elected mayor, would you push for more and stronger efforts surrounding neighborhood preservation?
I would. In fact, I've already done that in the private sector. Some of you know Fourth Ward. I'm one of the persons who tried to preserve the historic characteristics of that. Look, there are two types of development, inclusive development and displacement development. Displacement development is where new development comes in and displaces the original population or community. That's wrong for this city. This is a great city. We need to maintain its diversity and its historic nature. I'm an advocate for inclusive development. That is, if you have new development coming into a neighborhood, we're going to preserve the integrity of the neighborhood while at the same time adding the new development.
Bill King, should it be up to the city to figure all of this out, or should we just let the market decide?
Well, it's going to be a combination of things. I think that one of the things we've gotten away from here is we're so centralized in this city. Our neighborhoods actually have very little control over what happens in their neighborhoods. If you took most of our super neighborhoods and incorporated them separately, they would be in the top 30 cities in terms of size. In Texas, they'd be electing their own mayor, setting their own budget, hiring their own police chief, and yet our folks in the neighborhoods have almost nothing to say about what goes on in their neighborhoods. So I think empowering the neighborhoods more, giving them resources, deciding how some of those are going to be spent in their neighborhood is key to neighborhood preservation, and I think it's a better model than the centralized model we have right now.
All right, Ben Hall, you wanted to follow up on that?
Let me say, I think Bill begins correctly in terms we need to give the neighborhoods more power, but we also need to take a little power away from Public Works. Public Works right now is dysfunctional, and it's not operating properly. It's making decisions that are impacting your direct lives without public input. That's wrong, and as the next mayor of the city of Houston, we're going to change that where your neighborhoods have more input in terms of the developments that are coming there.
All right, Victoria?
Yeah, I think that we should hire and find people that are genius how to develop the city. One of my friends that's an engineer, he's really smart. And so we need to find how to structure the city, because if we don't find somebody that is smart to figure how to remodel the city, then we have engineers now that they hired in the city that are no good, and they're just pocketing the money. So we need to find the engineer that's honest and that works for the city, not for their own pocket.
Steve, I know you want to comment on that, but I also saw Sylvester nod towards
Just very, very quickly, I think you'll have the department heads and others going their own way when you do not have a methodical plan, or in this case, let's say a general plan that provides all of us with some guidance. I think, and you can't do it in a haphazard basis. It has to be short as well as long term. That is the importance of having a general plan, having a methodical system put in place so that department heads, developers, community groups pretty much know the direction in which we're going. And then you have to update it on a yearly basis. And then the mayor has to be at the table, making sure that we're getting the desired results.
All right, Steve Costello.
Well, I think the biggest issue has to do with how the city interfaces with the neighborhoods. And I've always advocated for the planning department to be a repository for deed restrictions, and needed to work with all these neighborhoods, helping them with their deed restrictions. The other is that if you look at the Ashby High-Rise business model, and if you look at what happened at the Hines project over on San Felipe, the issue had to do with building a large facility building with limited traffic access. And so the city needs to be investing in those areas to accommodate for development, because really the asset of the city of Houston is market-driven development. And we really don't want to take that away, but we still want to protect our neighborhoods.
All right, go ahead, Adrian Garcia, and then this also will transition us into neighborhoods and housing, but go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to say that, look, it makes no sense for the city to ask you to go through a process of helping us provide consensus and direction on a general plan if the plan just sits on the shelf, or if we expect individual leadership by respective departments to think about the plan as they do their respective work. The plan under my administration will be directly attached to every single department. It will guide how we spend every tax dollar, because too often people say, well, how are you going to implement the plan? Where are you going to get the money from? The money's there. We just have to be much more strategic, thoughtful, planning on how to invest the public dollars that we're getting. That's how we make the plan meaningful throughout the process, and that's how we absorb the population that's coming our way.
All right, I want to move on to neighborhoods and housing. And Chris Bell, some areas of Houston are seeing amazing transformations. Townhomes, multifamily buildings replacing single-family homes. Other areas have seen little to no development. In some cases, they're just deteriorating. Are you concerned this can create an ever deeper division between rich and poor neighborhoods and housing?
Yes, and it's an issue that has come up repeatedly during the course of the campaign, and I think that's really the main issue that's on the table. Whether you focus on trying to encourage development in very underdeveloped areas, as we saw in the earlier presentation, or whether you continue to try to encourage redevelopment in established neighborhoods. And what we're finding by our experience and what we are hearing is that in these areas where we've gone in and tried to encourage redevelopment in established areas, thinking we're doing a big favor for those areas, a lot of the people who've lived there for a long time get run out and can no longer afford to live in the area. And we promise that there won't be gentrification, but then there is gentrification. So I think the city's policy should be do no harm and look for areas that are undeveloped where development would be welcome. And there are a lot of those areas that lend themselves to just the kind of development that people are looking for in this day and age: mixed use, denser, walkability, all those factors can be addressed, and you can also have the affordable housing element.
All right, Marty McVeigh.
Well, I served for over 4.5 years. I served you as one of the directors of the United States Agency for International Development, and I can assure you today that all growth is not good. I've seen countries collapse. I've seen regions of the world suffer because of unplanned growth. And what I've heard today, and after 40-some debates just like this one, is that we continue to follow the city's model of let's go do something and let's go do something before we have an actual plan. The first step that we have to do when balancing our budget and getting our financial house in order is to get a real plan that encompasses everything.
All right, I'm going to stop you there. Sylvester Turner wanted to chime in.
We do, whether we like it or not, we do have two cities in one. We do have haves and have-nots. And I live in one of those areas. I grew up in Acres Home. I still live in Acres Home. But it's not just about putting in the infrastructure. People look for retail. People want quality schools. You cannot have a growing city and then the mayor not interact very closely with your local school districts, because people are looking for many things. If you provide complete neighborhoods and complete streets and maintain the character of those areas, people will move into those areas. But they're not going to move up into those areas if that infrastructure, both human and structural, are not there.
Steve Costello.
Yes, well, the city's Housing and Community Development Department gets funding from HUD every 2 years. And, you know, a portion of that funding is actually for economic development. And the city has really used the lion's share of the money for housing and not necessarily mixed-use housing. They're taking a little different view about that, and that's what the city should be doing. But the Food Desert program I have been working on is getting grocery stores in underserved neighborhoods. We're using the HUD economic development funds to have grant programs for grocers to get into these neighborhoods. And that's what this is about, is some of these underserved neighborhoods is economic development.
Victoria Lane, I have a question for you. What can or should the city do to create more housing choices that don't just cater to the upper class?
I think that I would find an investor that can invest just $10,000 and open a bank. And that way we can loan to people affordable if you have bad credit. Because 99% of the people has bad credit here in America. And if you go apply in the bank right now, they won't approve. And it makes it so hard for them to get into affordable housing. So if we create our own bank and loan to people and make sure that they pay, I will be the one that will collect. So I'm good on collection. So the thing is, we have to find affordable housing for them. So by having our own bank, let's say 1 million people put in $10,000, we can create our own bank. Because the Chinese, all these different diversification, they open their own bank and they become so rich here. And so what happened to the Americans? Why you don't open your own? Why do you rely on Chase, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo? And they usually don't approve your loan. I have gone through so many of my clients, decline. And they even make $200,000 a year.
My apologies, I got to stop you there. But I want to follow up though on this notion of affordability. I'm going to start with Marty McVeigh, but I encourage the rest of you to chime in on this.
What was the question?
Well, here's my question for you. She mentioned affordability and how many more Houstonians just simply can't afford the housing that they're in. Rents have gone up, home sales have gone up. some folks move further and further away from where they're working. So then, of course, the cost of transportation goes up along with it. What would you do as mayor? What should the next mayor, the next city council do in the coming years to push for neighborhoods and housing that sort of discourage that trend? And how would you do it?
Well, certainly it's through economic development. I mean, if the trend is that we're going to have this growth, and we certainly may have it, as I've said, and I will continue to say, not all growth is smart growth. We've got to plan, and the current plan that's before City Council, it is a step. It is a step in the right direction. I would not allow any city department to go forward with anything that's on the plan yet, because it is not all-encompassing. I have been very vocal on this issue. Until we have something that is doable going forward, then we're going to continue to have the problem. So how do we protect neighborhoods? Well, we need to reinvest our neighborhood Houston money, at least 30% of it, back into the neighborhoods, because Houston is a collection of neighborhoods. That's how this city grew to begin with. So we have to make sure that those funds are going back to where it's intended to be used. And I want to tell you something a little bit about food deserts and about grocery stores.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's hold off on that for the moment, but we'll come back to it.
Well, it's about neighborhoods, so.
All right, no, fair enough. But Adrian Garcia wanted to comment, Steve Costello wanted to comment. I want to make sure they get their comments in, and then I'll pose a question about food deserts.
Well, first of all, as I look down at Plan Houston's 12 core strategies, I really applaud you for ensuring that fostering an affordable city is one of the core strategies. That's important to me. But let's not forget that when we talk about affordable housing, that's not all-inclusive. 24% of the city is providing for a family of four on $24,000. And so low-income housing, I hope, is a part of this core strategy, because that's all of Houston. That we have to think about that and be thoughtful. But the other side of affordable housing, it's generally been an afterthought when you think about all of the things that the city is involved in. And so we have to make sure to push affordable housing, low-income housing to the forefront, and not just welcome multifamily development.
All right, Steve Costello.
Well, some of the TERS actually give about a third of their increment back to the city of Houston to be used for affordable housing. But there are a couple of TERS that are being a little bit more creative. And what they're being creative about is they're worried about gentrification, so they're going to be using their increment to buy down rents within their districts. And so this is a good thing, because what it does is it allows for development to occur, allows for quality development, and yet buys it down so that the residents that will be living in those TERS boundaries will be able to stay there and live there.
All right. Marty McVeigh, I want to come back to you on the food desert question. There have been some efforts the last few years to address food deserts. The major grocery store chains typically don't want to move into those neighborhoods because they might see them as security risks, or they think they can't make money there. What would you do differently as mayor from what you believe has been done the last few years to change that dynamic?
Well, certainly we want to make sure that the people of the city are served in a proper way. But I've heard Mr. Costello use this as an economic development tool, and I can assure you, as my role for over 4.5 years at USAID, grocery stores do not bring in economic development. That doesn't do anything. Grocery stores are the last thing to enter into a neighborhood after the growth has already occurred. So if we want to bring services to the people of this city, then we've got to locate businesses in those areas. So we've got the north, the south, and the east that experience high numbers of food deserts in those areas. We need to bring in businesses there that bring jobs, that bring people, that bring rooftops, that bring grocery stores. That's how it works. So if you don't understand that grocery stores are the last thing to come into a neighborhood naturally, then you don't understand economic development.
All right, since he referenced you, Steve Costello,
Sure, I'd love
give you
to
a chance
address that,
comment,
because
and then just hang on a second. After that, Sylvester Turner will have a chance.
The areas that we're focusing on are already fully developed. The problem is they don't have any grocery stores. They don't have kids. They don't have jobs for kids. I met my wife 43 years ago in a grocery store, 2 kids working part-time. I mean, this is what this is about. We need to create jobs for our children. And then not only that, once a grocery store is in place, you get the other stores that supplement a grocery store. And the issue about whether or not the large grocers are involved, we actually have 6 grocers that are currently in various stages of development. 2 of them are 60,000 square foot stores, 2 of them are 50,000 square foot stores. So we're ready to announce.
All right, Sylvester Turner.
You need complete neighborhoods. I mean, fine with the grocery stores, but there's so many other things that are needed. We talked about affordable housing. The city, through its HUD program, is spending $15,000 a door to build residential houses downtown. And over the next year or two, there will probably be about 7,000 people living downtown. That same sort of concept now needs to be focused on areas within our neighborhoods and our communities. You need workforce development housing in our neighborhoods. Once you build complete neighborhoods, the 47% of the people in this in the city of Houston are not are living in apartments. In order to offset the city costs, you need a house of about $170,000.
Right.
We need more of those.
Okay.
And until that, and then you have to go out and recruit other stores to come into the area. But complete
Gotcha.
neighborhoods.
All right, Adrian Garcia and then Chris Bell.
I wanted to touch back on the issue of food deserts. And once again, I'm looking at your plan, and at number 3 is nurture safe and healthy neighborhoods. Folks, if we don't provide healthy opportunities in neighborhoods, then everything else is lost. They become less safe, they become less productive, folks won't be able to afford their homes, and so I think look, I want to be your mayor, not because it's going to be easy, but because it's going to be hard. These 12 core strategies will have to be executed all at once.
All right, Chris Bell.
Well, we obviously need to create a program where more people can meet their wives in grocery stores.
I agree. 40 years tomorrow.
But we also need to support these efforts. Look, years ago, banks did not want to go into underprivileged neighborhoods, and the leaders in the minority community worked and worked to encourage the banks. Texas Commerce was the first. They put in the branch on Alameda. People were tripping over themselves to open up accounts. It was a huge success, and it grew from there. And when major chains are willing to go into a neighborhood, the city needs to work with them in every way possible to help it be successful, and then more will follow.
All right, let's move on to your favorite subject, traffic, transportation and mobility. Let's start with Adrian Garcia. Can we get more people to ride bicycles in the city of Houston?
I think so. I mean, once you, look, we have a lot of bicyclists already. In fact, last night I saw a whole corps of people going down the street on Woodhead. I don't know if any of you are in here, but it was neat to see you. Thank you. But look, the only thing wrong with that picture was that they needed a police escort. We need dedicated bike lanes. I applaud Mayor Parker for implementing the dedicated bike lanes downtown. We need to make sure to have a full commitment to complete streets. We need to have a full commitment to making sure that folks who are driving vehicles respect those on bicycles. You know, we've talked about how to make sure that people understand that there's a 3-foot rule and how to respect bicyclists. Part of my strategy is that every moving citation will require someone or that person to go through or to have the bicycle safety course. We have to hit core mass to get people to understand who are driving vehicles, that bicycles are important and that we ought to respect them.
All right, you mentioned the Complete Streets model, which calls for safe accommodation for cyclists and pedestrians along with cars. I'll throw this out to all of you, anybody that wants to chime in on this. What would you do specifically to commit to further implementation of Complete Streets when you're elected mayor? Bill King.
Well, we have an insane sidewalk policy in this town which says that the homeowner is responsible for maintaining the sidewalk in front of their house. This is the worst idea I've ever heard of. It means that the sidewalk on any block is only going to be as good as the least responsible homeowner along that block. Plus the fact for an individual homeowner to go out and maintain a sidewalk is probably 10 times what it takes for the city to do it. This is a civic responsibility. The city needs to undertake this, and the city needs to be responsible for building and maintaining sidewalks just like streets.
All right, Steve Costello, then Marty McVeigh.
Just a quick comment. You know, the city is not a bike-friendly city, and we can't build complete streets everywhere. We do have to develop a plan where we have an adequate cross-town traffic for bikes separated from cars until we're able to get a car-friendly city. And relative to the issue of Goal Zero, which I fully support, we need to continue to tell people that a bike is just like a car on a road.
Marty.
For sure, I ride a bike myself, and I want safe streets where I can ride it and not get run over. But Bill brought up a good point about sidewalks. Have you ever seen a telephone pole or a light pole in the middle of a sidewalk or on a ramp for a handicapped person that they can't use it because there's an easement there? That doesn't make any sense. The city has given away utility easements to let the utility providers to do this kind of thing. We need to revise those agreements so we don't have sidewalk ramps with a telephone pole right in the middle, and it's unpassable.
Chris Bell.
Well, I have vowed to lay 200 miles of new or improved sidewalk in my first term, and I think it's incumbent upon us to do so. People are entitled to be able to walk around their neighborhood in a safe manner. Right now, we're about 75 miles per year, and I think we need to work to increase that. And so there would obviously be a focus on complete streets. And as far as bikes, I think connectivity, we need to continue to work toward that, but it does have to be safe. And if we're not going to enforce the 3-foot rule, people aren't going to feel safe, and I think we're going to have to make some folks, an example, start enforcing that law and keep cars away from bicycles.
Sylvester Turner.
And as a part of Complete Streets, sidewalks are critically important. I know when Metro having now completed the light rail, there's $109 million left over. I would suggest that that Metro utilize the $109 to be placed on for building and repairing those sidewalks.
Adrian Garcia.
I just want to close with the fact that to complete this loop, to encourage more people to get on their bikes, let's assume the administration makes a commitment to complete streets. We also have to encourage the business leaders downtown and within those respective economic sectors to support their employees who want to bike to work. Michael Skelly, incredible energy leader, allowing his folks to take showers at work after they bike in, and then not paying for parking downtown. We have to make sure that we encourage that kind of thought in the economic sectors.
I encourage that to all my coworkers if you're, never mind. Showering in general. Okay, I actually, Victoria Lane, you wanted to comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that I went to Minnesota and they have a bike trail and a walk trail so you don't hit each other. So when you are on the bike trail, you have to stay on the bike and the walk trail. And it's really nice because a lot of people there, they're not fat. So we need to lose weight too in the city of Houston because we're #1 fattest city in the city of Houston, in the whole city of United States. So we need to be healthy by doing the bike and helping also the mobility in the city of Houston. Thank you.
Sylvester Turner, I want to come back to you and ask if there's enough space on our roads to accommodate more bike lanes, better sidewalks, more shade and landscaping, we heard about that earlier, while also preparing for more cars on the road. Inevitably, more cars will be coming. Is there a tipping point in how much the city can do to transform all that?
Well, certainly there's a tipping point. I mean, too much of anything reaches a tipping point where it moves in a different direction. But I think that's why you have to engage in methodical planning. There has to be planning with regards to complete neighborhoods, complete streets. I think you have to work in collaboration between Texas Department of Transportation, for example, Metro, in order to accommodate the additional population. I think that's when we're talking about what city are we building? How are we going to design this city? And the reality is, just based on the chart, people in the city of Houston want an urban, walkable, pedestrian-friendly city. And that's why you have to provide people with multimodal forms of transportation. There are some people who simply want to walk to the employment center, or they want to walk to a retail center. So you have to design a city with that in mind, which means you have to change the city codes in order to meet today and the future generations of this city. So it has to be multimodal. We have a lot of trucks coming into this area, but I think we need to look at dedicated truck lanes to take some of these big trucks out of the way.
All right, Marty McVeigh.
Well, a complete street program assumes that there is a complete plan for the city of Houston. It's only part of it. I believe in bikes. I believe in alternative forms of transportation. The growth that is occurring in the city of Houston, traffic-wise, is increasing at 6% annually. There is no end in sight to that. It's only going to get worse when the Port of Houston takes in the Panama Canal expansion. So we need to make sure that we first have a real plan that is a complete plan that includes these things.
Okay. Yeah, Adrian Garcia.
Well, I just want to make sure that we also recognize the fact that Complete Streets is a phenomenal program. I'm going to support it. You give me permission to serve you as your mayor. But we also have to recognize the fact that not every neighborhood can sustain a complete street. So we have to be thoughtful about how we roll it out in all the respective areas. But it is an important concept to provide. And I appreciate Victoria mentioning the healthy aspect of it, because she's completely right. You know, I remember as a kid riding my bike to school, riding my bike all around town. Kids can't do that today. We have to give them complete streets, safe streets, so they can get back on their bikes and be healthier.
All right, I want to refocus our conversation, and again, this is sort of out to all of you. Sylvester Turner mentioned the idea of dedicated truck lanes. We know there have been efforts to expand transit here and there. There are all sorts of different ways to create more transportation options for people, but do the options actually lead to changing habits, or should people's habits be the way that we determine what's available? And what I mean by that is, if you have a dedicated truck lane, okay, that's fine for trucks, but if, let's say you have an HOV lane and people aren't using it, well then does that just create more traffic problems? Adrian Garcia, start us off.
You know, when I was the chair of the city's Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee, I took a shot at this. I mean, I saw how the heavy trucks were creating incredible damage to our roadways, and that's, you know, that was off the main interstates. The reality is that, one, I think it's both ends. You work both ends to the middle. The market is in part what creates some of the habits, but we also have to talk about this and work with community leaders like yourself, the super neighborhoods, talk about what's available so that people know that they have viable options than just their vehicles. But I think you work both ends towards the middle.
All right, Marty McVeigh.
Well, we do have to change the culture of this city. We are growing. And if you've lived here more than 5 years, you understand that the traffic has increased. The getting around is worse. The streets themselves are worse. So the city has pretty much ignored this growth. And that's what makes me very uncomfortable with the fact that we're not growing in a smart way. So without a plan, we're going to continue to have these problems, and just looking at issues and you know, talking about them is not action. We have to have an actionable plan, something that has limits on it and something that we can actually do. We have to accept the fact that this city is growing, and we need to grow with it.
All right, Sylvester Turner, go ahead and give your comment.
Just very quickly.
Yeah.
Decisions do lead to actions. In the 90s, we made a decision to put a lot of money on just building roads, and we built the Grand Parkway. And people moved in that direction. We cannot give up on mass transit. Okay, and then we need the multimodal, the commuter line from Missouri Fort Bend, 98. I think we need to take a look at that. But I think we have to be committed to mass transit in order to segue into our future when we recognize that more people are coming. Technology, Metro, I applaud them on rebrand. We'll see how that works. But the bus system, a Metro, needs to be using more technology so people can know in real time that a bus is 2 minutes away.
All right, so what would the rest of you do as mayor to improve mass transit?
Well, the issue here on mass transit is the fact that we need to have an investment in commuter rail. The problem that we're not doing is the fact that the delivery system of Metro is not prepared for mass transit to come in. However, this is going to take several years of planning. We need to begin the investment on commuter rail out to the suburbs, or what's going to happen is that the business communities are going to move out to the suburbs, out of the city limits. That's not what we want. We want the business community to stay here and have the suburb residents moving into work. And so we need to continue to work on investments in mass transit.
Well, Bill King?
Yeah, so I think there's a certain hubris in thinking we're going to predict what's going to happen, because there are some very disruptive technologies that are right on the horizon right now. I know some of you have seen this professor at Stanford that's talking about how quickly the advent of self-directed automobiles is going to be, and the change that's going to make. And to talk about going out and building a commuter rail line, which the cheapest one that we can build is about $3 billion, which nobody has any idea of where we would get that money, and it may be made completely obsolete by the technological disruptions that are just over the horizon.
Ben Hall.
Let me address two specific approaches. One is commercial vehicles. We can have dedicated commercial vehicle lanes that treat intra-commercial vehicle traffic and inter-city commercial vehicle transportation around the city. Let me say that is important, and we must do it because those vehicles are destroying our streets. Number two, You have an approach concerning penalizing drivers or rewarding drivers. Having more lanes, people are going to just simply flock there. Once Beltway 8 opened up, everyone went there and we occupied those lanes. We've got to reward people for not using those congested airways.
All right,
I
Adrian.
mean, those congested roadways, and there are ways to do that.
All right, Adrian Garcia.
You know, the idea of light rail versus commuter rail, look, we need them both. But at the end of the day, we won't create the buy-in until we effectively saturate the light rail system. We have to create transit-oriented development so that people will have confidence in it, that once they get off of it, they can walk to wherever they live, shop, work, and play, or they can get on their bike, or if they do need a car, they will have synchronized lights. But at the end of the day, we have to make sure that that system is demonstrating confidence so they can be passed on to future generations, and then we'll be primed for commuter rail.
All right, Chris Bell.
Bill, the problem is you mentioned commuter rail, but you don't want to see any rail. And I voted for the first rail line down Main Street as a member of council, and I've advocated for the expansion as a member of Congress, and will continue to advocate for its expansion where possible. But in some areas, it's simply not affordable, and that's why I'm excited about bus rapid transit, because it is a more affordable alternative, costing about a quarter of what light rail costs. And I think in some of these underserved corridors, it's the perfect alternative moving forward. And I don't think we can afford to continue to not have a serious mass transit program here in the city of Houston.
Bill King, response?
Well, the problem with rail is it's just astronomically expensive. We spent $3.5 billion on the current light rail system, and we have a very marginal increase in transit ridership. There were dozens of things that we could have done to increase transit ridership with that $3.5 billion, including the improvement in the bus system that we did just now. We basically gutted the bus service by building the light rail. We actually have fewer mass transit riders today than we did in 2003. So what's the objective? Is it to increase ridership? Then we need to look at what things actually do that and what don't, based on the data, not based on preconceived notions.
All right, so the three of you on the end all want to chime in. I'm going to go Victoria, then Marty, then Sylvester.
I think Chris, Bill, and Bill King, they have such a good idea and good plans. But if we don't have the money to do all this planning, I think immediately we should eliminate those big buses and put a little bus, mini bus temporarily until we can afford and find the money. Because there's no way we can do the train and all those other stuff that we need to plan when there's no money. That's the problem in the city, mismanaging of the money. And if we don't have the money, you can talk all your planning, you can do all you want, but it's not going to work without the money. Thank
All right,
you.
Marty?
The reality is that we need rail. You know, laying of the first tracks in downtown for light rail is a good thing. It was a start. We've got to start somewhere, just like the plan of Houston. I don't understand why we are talking about not having a funding source when we've got the federal government that gives out federal dollars to other cities around the country for mass transit, and we don't have a congressional leadership that is leading in this area to bring in federal dollars for transportation, for trains, and other things that we need to curtail our growth in traffic.
The cost of not having an effective mass transit system, according to A&M, is that the average person is sitting in traffic on a year 1,500 hours that we're losing. We're losing in productivity. So there is a cost when you don't do anything. The reality is that we missed out on a lot of those federal dollars in the 1990s. And then let's not talk about it as if it's just the city of Houston. If you vote for the proposition in November, Texas Department of Transportation will be receiving an additional $2.5 billion a year. It is important for the mayor to be working with the Texas Department of Transportation, your legislative leaders, along with regional authorities to develop a regional transportation system. It's not just the city of Houston, it's the entire region, and we must work collaboratively.
Folks, we need to move on to infrastructure and services. I want to start with Bill King. You have been critical of Rebuild Houston. How would you fund road improvements?
Well, there's a couple things wrong with Rebuild Houston. The first is the lockbox turned out not to be a lockbox at all. We're now paying for 550 full-time employees out of that fund, about a third of which have desk jobs down at City Hall. But the real problem with Rebuild Houston was the pay-as-you-go feature. Pay-as-you-go does not work. It does not work because the construction inflation for almost any historical period that you look at is higher than the municipal bond rate. So it's actually costs more money to try to put these projects off and build them later. And in the meantime, the public doesn't have the benefit of those projects, so we're blowing tires out and our houses are still getting flooded while we're waiting on this pay-as-you-go system. You know, Steve's fond of saying that in 15 years we'll have $600 million a year spent on infrastructure. The problem is in 15 years, if you have a 4% discount for inflation, we'll be spending less money in real dollars than we are today. We need to go back to what we did for 180 years, which is do bonds and get some of this infrastructure work started. We're building exactly 1/4 of the lane miles that we were 10 years ago inside the city of Houston right now.
Steve
Well, I'd
Costello.
love to rebut this. This is interesting because Bill King says that we have too much debt, yet he wants to go back to a debt model, and yet we have a debt ceiling in 2 years, so he can't sell debt. So in my entire career in the city of Houston for the last 30 years, the average investment in roads has been $100 million. Today, we're spending $300 million a year. In the next 10 years, we'll be spending $600 million a year. And he says about the people that we refer that we're doing in maintenance, those maintenance people are still being funded through Metro dollars, not through the drainage user fee. This is an incredible program that lowers the city's debt. It's a pay-as-you-go program. And you go out and look at neighborhoods like Brentwood, out off of Harum Clark. You go to a neighborhood like Outpost Estates out in Spring Branch area. You go to a neighborhood in Larchmont, which is just over here off of 59 in Chimney Rock. We rebuilt the entire neighborhood from curb to curb. That's what Rebuild Houston's about.
Bill King.
Yeah, so the debt's not down at all. In the last 6 years, the debt is exactly the same for the general fund. Now, we have added $3.3 billion of debt to the entire city in the last 6 years. There's absolutely no restriction on us selling bonds next year. This mythical debt limit does not exist. I've talked to all the investment bankers. We can easily do a bond issue next year. What I'm opposed to, Steve, is not increasing the debt, but it's increasing and getting nothing for it. In the last 3 years, $3.3 billion new debt under your budget committee, and we have nothing to show for it.
Actually, what we have to show for it is because of Rebuild Houston's lowering the debt, we were able to pass a bond issue to fund the
It hasn't lowered the debt,
Bayou
Steve.
2020
I've got
program.
the audit. I'll show it to you. The debt's not down one penny during the time that you've been on budget chair. It
Well,
has not
we
gone
don't
down,
know.
Steve.
Actually, we don't know what we have to show for it because there's been a complete lack of transparency with the program. And at the very least, you need an audit to tell the taxpayers how their money has been spent. They were promised that the dollars would be spent on drainage and streets, and then you hear about $3 million going to a janitorial services contract. That doesn't have a whole lot to do with drainage unless you're talking about draining the mop bucket. So people are entitled to the information, and that would be up online in my administration.
Well, I think it's certainly one reason why you certainly need a general plan to provide some guidelines on how monies that are coming in are being spent. Is what happens when you create a dedicated source for a dedicated purpose, but the dollars are not being used for that. It's an excellent concept. I agree. You can't debt yourself for the infrastructure, because we're already paying about $150 million a year on debt service, and the city's debt is going to spike in 2018. So it's an excellent concept. It needs to be a dedicated source for a dedicated purpose, streets and drainage, and not for other projects.
All right, now, Barney McVeigh wanted to speak. He's been very patient.
Yeah,
then Ben Hall, and then Victoria Lane.
You know, if we want a plan, it's got to be a business plan. It can't be just a general plan or you know, people's pet projects. But when you talk about debt financing, and Steve's just got this wrong. We can bond. We can bond our general debt. This is not about bonding the the infrastructure debt. These are two different things. We have to get our financial house in order, and the way to do that is we have to bond our general debt. So because of the pension issue that's spiking out of control. And move forward. We got to move forward with a new plan that encompasses a sound financial model moving forward.
All right, Ben Hall.
The rain tax was clearly a tragic and bad policy. It couldn't be further from good policy for the city of Houston, and the reason is following. If you were to buy your house and say, I'm going to pay as I go, then that means that once you put up one timber, you'll have to wait until you get enough money to buy brick. You can't do it that way. You do have to bond this debt in order to take care of the street and infrastructure repairs. Bill's right on this one. Steve is wrong, and Steve has no credibility on this because he actually approved the misspending out of this fund for the janitorial services.
All right, Victoria Lane, and then Steve will give you a chance to respond to that, and then we'll wrap up from there.
Well, when we have a house and we have, your driveway and you need to fix it, so you call somebody to fix it. and you find how much it costs. So you ask different prices of how much the budget. So once I become mayor, I'm going to drive all over the city with my crew and find where's all this pothole and fix it right away. We don't need to borrow the money. We can do it. Houston has a lot of income. There is money to fix this road right away because there's a lot of potholes. And if the third world country has no pothole and our city is the fourth largest, why cannot we fix? Why do we have to borrow money?
All right.
I never borrow money to fix my driveway.
Okay,
Thank you.
Steve Costello, and then we're going to have to wrap up.
So prior to Rebuild Houston's passage, for every dollar we were putting in the ground, we were spending $1.48 in payments. That doesn't make sense. This is a good program. Obviously, it needs to be improved because we have problems throughout all of the city of Houston. And in 4 short years, as I said earlier, we've lowered the debt. We've allowed more debt to be sold on behalf of the Bayou 2020 plan, which wouldn't have been able to have been done without Rebuild Houston in place. So I look forward to this plan moving forward. I look forward to its successes throughout the entire city.
All right, a brief reminder that if you have any questions for the candidates, to write them down on cards available to you. Folks are walking around, just raise your hand and they'll hand you a card. Then we'll get to those a bit later. At this time, though, it's time for our next presentation, which offers an overview of Plan Houston, and then we'll be back with more discussion.
Thank you, Craig. That was a great discussion, and thank you to all the candidates for a truly fantastic discussion of issues facing us. We've looked at where we are today and some of the issues we face. To continue with our roadmap metaphor, let's now turn our discussion to how we can all get to a future that most of us want. As our candidates know, and many of you are aware, the City of Houston is in the process of preparing a general plan. Blueprint Houston has been a tireless advocate for a citizen-based plan, and after close to 15 years, we are almost there. The first stage in this process was recently completed. It is under consideration by City Council right now. Let's take a closer look at Plan Houston and see how it can be harnessed to address some of the issues we've been discussing. Over 1 year ago, the City of Houston began the process of preparing a general plan. The initial phase of this plan is complete. This is the public face of Plan Houston, the online home page, and all of you are invited to explore it. Before we get into the details of Plan Houston, let's understand where we are in the process. These statements are from the current Plan Houston document. They clearly state that the current document is a starting point for a continuing process over time. But we have already accomplished a lot. We've outlined a broad vision and a set of core strategies based on 32 goals reflecting the public's values and priorities. Plan Houston is intentionally high level. A list of specific implementation projects, such as one might find in a typical short-term plan, would quickly become obsolete and would require regular updating. They also would not help guide policy and promote effective governance. As opposed, they would simply itemize a laundry list of projects. Plan Houston proposes an ongoing and dynamic implementation process that allows for flexibility and for all parties to be involved in policy making and planning. With these principles in mind, let's take a look at the structure and content of Plan Houston. Plan Houston includes these components: a vision statement that describes our preferred future, 32 goals drawn from extensive citizen participation, 12 core strategies so our city government can advance those 32 goals, actions for each core strategy, performance indicators to track a broad range of metrics like walkability, public safety, and economic activity, allowing us to gauge progress toward the goals, an online planning coordination tool to display local plans, helping neighborhoods, developers, and public officials leverage planning and policy efforts, and an annual work plan, like the CIP, to coordinate the city's ongoing work on updating policies, plans, and ordinances. This is the vision statement. Houston offers opportunity for all and celebrates its diversity of people, economy, culture, and places. Houston promotes healthy and resilient communities through smart civic investments, dynamic partnerships, education, and innovation. Houston is the place where anyone can prosper and feel at home. Houston, opportunity, diversity, community, home. These are the 12 core strategies. They are general statements intended to set a framework for the city's ongoing work. Each of them is supported by a series of actions. Let's take a closer look at a few of these to see how the plan is structured. But before we leave this slide, I will give you a moment to scan all of them. So let's focus on one of the core strategies to see how we intend to, for example, connect people and places. We can see that the first action is to develop and maintain a comprehensive mobility plan. This is a straightforward and sensible recommendation, something that the planning department should begin immediately based on the discussion we've been having up here. Preparing a mobility plan will also be informed by and related to other core strategies that will help us spend money more wisely, support our global economy, and will require us to partner with others, public and private. This is a directive for the planning department to do just that. Develop and maintain a comprehensive mobility plan that includes all modes of transportation and partnerships with others. The next action under Connect People and Places is to encourage compact, pedestrian-friendly development around transit. How exactly to do that is not fleshed out at this point, but according to the Kinder Institute, this is clearly a priority for the citizens, and the next administration will need to advance this goal. We have a number of existing ordinances that could be reviewed and amended. Perhaps incentives could be explored. Our audience, no doubt, will be very interested to hear how the candidates will want to move toward this objective. Some of the core strategies have been criticized as being vague and insubstantial. Grow responsibly. What exactly does that mean? Yet if we look at the third action under this strategy, we can see that it involves some solid and sensible principles. If we are going to accommodate growth on a large scale and be successful at it, it is imperative that all the pieces fit together properly. Where will people in a community work and shop? Are there diverse and affordable housing choices? Are there a number of transportation options well coordinated with key destinations? What about schools, healthcare facilities? And how do we proceed without zoning, which Plan Houston is not proposing? Indeed, this is the essence of planning. To be sure, a lot of this kind of planning activity happens already, but it is not well known, widely discussed, or well coordinated. Different agencies and entities deal with different pieces of the puzzle. How can we make sure that everyone is on the same page and working toward an objective that enjoys widespread public approval? Plan Houston is how. Now let's be clear, we're not starting from scratch, and we are already doing many of the things that Plan Houston is talking about. Let's look back at the vision statement. This is the second sentence. Yes, we are already building some great communities. And this is the third sentence from the vision statement. And as you may recall from the first presentation, our growth is unevenly distributed. So is our prosperity. We have great wealth and opportunity in this city, and we also have 22% of the population living below the poverty line. We still have a lot of work to do before we can say that we have achieved our vision. That's the vision, that's the destination, and Plan Houston is a vehicle for efficient, effective, and transparent city government that can get us there. For some thoughts on how we get there, let's turn it back over to Craig Cohen and our panelists, one of whom will be our next mayor.
All right, panel, you've all met with Blueprint Houston individually and acknowledged that planning for the future is a good and useful thing in the abstract. Now that we have those broad brushes delineated and the City Council is poised to vote on this very document next week, my question, and this is for all of you, and I'll ask you to respond in reverse alphabetical order this time, what would you do as mayor to implement the concepts laid out in Plan Houston? And we will start with Sylvester Turner.
And how long do I have for this?
You have a minute. This 60 seconds, you can knock that out, right?
Well, let me just say, City Council is reviewing it right now, and quite frankly, so am I. I think it's important for us to be methodical in our approach. It's important for, if I were elected mayor, to continue to sit down with community-based groups, as well as department heads, to try to fine-tune the specifics of it. We've talked about a lot of things this morning, But I don't think it's for me to sit here before you and just lay out some specifics on all of those areas. You're going to get it done in 1 minute. I certainly recognize the value of it. When we talk about complete neighborhoods and complete streets, I think that's critically important. But it's going to take a holistic approach. I'm not going to give you an answer to, for example, the finances of the city will face its challenges in 16, 17, and 18. And we'll have to deal with that on a collaborative basis. With respect to public safety, you only have 5,300 police officers, fewer than we had 10 years ago. And if you go to Partners on Safety, I've outlined that on the website. When it comes to education, I've outlined my Partners in Learning. I would encourage you to go there. So to give you specifics on all of that, I just can't do it in 60 seconds. I'm sorry.
Fair enough. Marty McVeigh.
Well, first of all, I applaud any plan as a first step. It is a first step, and I appreciate that. But I need a plan that I can actually move forward on, and that it is a business plan that includes good education, police, streets, walkable city, all of the things that we want and need in this city. I need something that I can move on. The City of Houston has consistently, for decades, worked on the assumption of let's go do this project, and it becomes unsustainable over time, just like Rebuild Houston, just like other things that have been started. So we need a real plan that encompasses everything, and I've got the most experience with development and growing an economy and also growing a government.
Victoria Lane.
We definitely need a plan, but this is what I'm going to say. I envision the city of Houston, which is the 4th largest city in the United States, to be the center of commerce and tourism in this country. In commerce, we need to further enhance our known resources in the oil industry and in the medical field. In tourism, we must not only improve our museum and other tourism infrastructure, but must establish more tourist attraction. To achieve this, we must utilize to the maximum our given advantage of very rich culture and racial diversities. We will encourage yearly festivals of all the ethnic groups in the city to increase awareness of the other culture, and those unite our people to achieve this end. As an Asian race educated in the United States, being in business for 40 years, I have attained the necessary experience to relate of all the ethnic races and diverse cultures in the city. This experience will certainly help me to achieve this vision. And also, we need to employ local contractor, go green Houston, improve the educational, and modernize our roads.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bill King.
I think we make a mistake if we assume that growth is inevitable, because it is most certainly not. Now, Detroit had 2 million people in 1950, about the same the city of Houston has today. Its population today is 600,000 people. We like to talk about how much Houston is growing, but the city's growth itself is actually very tepid. The region is growing robustly, but the city's population is only growing by about 1% a year for the last 20 years. I think the reason for that is that we're not providing the basic services that people expect. I can take you to neighborhoods that are 15 minutes from here where the streets are in terrible condition. They flood all the time. There are abandoned houses that have garbage stacked up in front of them, and the city's doing nothing about that. There are places where people don't feel safe in their neighborhoods, where they can't get the police to patrol. We have neighborhoods all over this city. They're going out and hiring constables and private securities because we're not providing police protection in there. Those are the kinds of things that drive people out of the city to the suburbs of other cities. Those are the issues that we need to address.
All right, Ben Hall.
First, I want to commend everyone who participated in working on the general plan. I think it is an excellent beginning. But in order to make sure it does not fall just on a shelf and is not implemented, we need further work, and we need the super neighborhoods to come together, because what I've learned in this race for mayor is how diverse this city is. And for any one person up here to think that we can now comment on what each particular neighborhood needs or wants is just misleading you. I will invite the super neighborhood presidents to come together, look at the general plan, and give us specific recommendations for their individual neighborhoods and areas. Number two, PWE, the Public Works Department, needs to address how it delivers the services to those respective neighborhoods. And number three, We need to allocate enough revenue to make sure that the general plan will be implemented in each of those super neighborhood areas. That would be my approach.
Adrian Garcia.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for providing us your input. I mean, too often the city does things and you're nowheres in the conversation. So I'm glad you drove the conversation. And I'm hopeful that City Council will approve the general plan. We don't want a specific plan. We want a general plan that allows for ongoing dialogue. And I'm proud of the fact that you indicated the general plan will be a living document, which means that it will allow us to deal with the specifics that we don't know today. But it will provide us the general framework for us to move forward. And I think it's imperative for our economic future that we adopt the plan and begin to implement it. Look, there's 32 goals in it, and it's hard to talk about every one of those goals in 60 seconds. But essentially, my strategy for implementing the plan will be to attach it to the budget process, attach it to the department procurement process. They're going to let a contract. How does it meet the plan? We're going to support a 380 agreement, a tax abatement. How does it support the plan? You don't necessarily have to find new money. You just have to adopt the plan and work it.
Steve Costello.
Well, I'm assuming the plan will be approved next week. The next directive as mayor will be to Director Walsh, who is in the audience, to establish a baseline where we are today in each one of these core strategies. And once the baseline is established, develop the performance measures that we are expecting to reach the goals that we want to make. And then once we identify the performance measures, then we identify what the investment is to reach those performance measures. That's what this is all about. So we're not quite sure where we are today. The general plan is a 30,000-foot level plan. It addresses multiple issues. We need to see where the city is today. We need to put that quilt together first to see exactly where we are today, and then decide if we're willing to make those investments. Now, what that's going to require is going back to council on a number of occasions. One, to identify and accept the baseline, understand the performance measures, and be willing on an annual basis to meet the capital investment required to meet those goals.
Chris Bell.
In our meetings with Blueprint Houston, we were informed that the last time the City of Houston had a general plan was 1928. It only took us 87 years to come up with a new one. You can't say we didn't have a lot of time to think about it. But now comes the hard part. And the criticism of the plan is that obviously it's too general. Well, that's where general plans start, and that's why it's called a general plan. And I think those who were involved in the process did an excellent job of laying out the vision, of laying out the goals and the principles to be followed, and that can be followed by the next administration. Every new mayor brings a new vision to the office. This offers a guide path. It also allows for shorter plans to be built into the general plan. Modern cities plan. Most progressive cities have 4-year plans, and I think that would be reasonable in a city like Houston given our term limits. And then you can have a checklist along the way to see how you are filling in those blanks, how you are driving the vision forward.
I'm curious because in some of your responses, I heard some concepts of how you would work or intend for there to be work with super neighborhoods, within the council, a structure, a process. I'm curious how hands-on you think a mayor should be in that kind of process. And I don't just mean in terms of, well, a mayor should pay attention to everything that's being developed in a plan, of course. But, I mean, how much of the nitty-gritty do you want to be involved in? Adrian Garcia, start us off.
I think that when you are talking about the future of the city, the mayor has to be regularly involved. Maybe it's difficult to say that I'll be involved in it every single day, but you want to ensure that the commitment to the plan is going to be alive throughout the process of the bureaucracy. And it's like I was saying, we're going to rebuild the street. Okay, when we finish, will it have a complete street? We're going to do some expansion or some adjustments to light rail. Will it provide for transit-oriented development? Are we going to do other things? Well, does it provide for landscape so people can walk more and provide for those things? I think that the whole process is that, number one, the mayor should be watching how the plan is being adopted, how it's being nurtured, how it's being facilitated, and then you entrust that your department directors are being the facilitators of the actual details of it. But I think the mayor has to be in the room as often as possible to ensure the commitment to the plan is there.
Ben Hall, then Marty McVeigh.
As a business owner, I've determined that if the owner of the business is not focusing on this being a priority, the workers simply don't do their job. As the mayor of the city of Houston, we have to send a clear message that this is a priority, that the goals of the general plan will be implemented in the city of Houston. Now, how we micromanage the result is a more difficult equation, but the mayor has to be involved in the sense that this is a priority that we are going to follow and implement. Now, one of the things we have to be careful about as a mayor, that we don't prejudge the conclusion for each neighborhood. The neighborhoods are so diverse in this city. As I was listening to the discussion earlier, Acres Homes is completely different from Galleria area, but their goals can conform to the general plan. We just have to let that neighborhood grow in the way and the direction that the neighbors and those who are property owners intended to grow. As the mayor, I will be involved in making sure this is a priority without prejudging the results.
Marty McVeigh, then Sylvester Turner.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard today that everybody on this stage pretty much supports a plan. One of us is going to be your next mayor. What happens in the next administration after this one? If we don't have a plan that is foolproof, meaning that it is immovable from a future administration, then we're going to be back in the same place again in the next 6 years, and the next 12 years, and the next 18 years after that. We've got to have a plan that is immovable, that takes the things that the people want in the city of Houston and puts them in and takes them out as our population changes, as our needs changes. But we've got to have something that is foolproof, that is not just concerned about the next 6 years, but about the next 60 years and the next century. That's how we're going to grow smart. That's how we're going to have a sustainable plan that is that protects us from a mayor that doesn't want to push these agenda items.
All right, Sylvester Turner, and then I want to wrap up there and give enough time for audience questions.
Okay. In this city, there is no city manager. The mayor is the city manager. For the last 32 years, I've owned my own business downtown. I've been on the appropriations. I've been in the legislature for 26 years. I've been on the appropriations committee for 21 of those 26 years. Currently, vice chair of the appropriations committee. What has been important is that what I've said to the leadership, even in Austin, is that I wanted to be at the table to know every aspect of the state's operation and where those dollars are. In order for this general plan to be actualized, the mayor has to be at the table, so in this instance, it's the mayor that's appointing the department heads and must give guidance all the way through the process. If the mayor is not engaged, then you simply have a general plan with no execution or implementation.
All right, Victoria Lane, I apologize. I saw you raise your hand as I started to say that's going to be it, so I'm going to let you comment, but then we do want to get to questions.
I think that once I become a mayor, I'm going to have the councilman and councilwoman be participating on this, and I'll be working 100%. And they need to get involved, and they need to report to me what's going on with their neighborhood, instead of just sitting there doing nothing or getting fat, okay? So what we need to do is we need to have a communication with all our leaders to make our city grow and prosperous and profitable. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Before we get to the questions, I just want to remind you, at the end of the whole thing here, you can pick up information outside in the lobby of the auditorium. Planning Issues, Plan Houston itself, there's information there. There's links to co-sponsors' websites and candidate questionnaires. There's candidates' campaign information, county voting materials, a sample ballot, locations, all that fun stuff. Also, we will be reopening the refreshments room. That's number 112 behind the auditorium, down the walkway to the right. That's after the forum. So just wanted to let you know about that. Okay, let's get to some audience questions. First one is, the vast majority of growth is in unincorporated Harris County. What is your view for annexation? And this is for anyone.
I don't think the political will is there to support annexation going forward, having gone on the city, become a member of the Houston City Council right after Kingwood and annexed, and living through that lovely period in the city's history. and seeing how that was received in the area. Obviously, back in the day, communities or these subdivisions were being built with the idea of being annexed in the future, but the mindset is different in this day and age, and I don't think that there really would be much backing for annexation in the future.
All right, Adrian Garcia, then Steve Costello, then Bill King, then Ben Hall.
I don't think we're ready for any additional annexation. I mean, we've already demonstrated to Kingwood and Clear Lake that we do a horrible job thinking about their core services when we take them into the city limits. But once again, one of your core strategies is grow responsibly. So I think once we get our house in order, make sure that we're providing and respecting all neighborhoods, that we're lifting them all up, that we're providing them equitable services on an even basis, that no neighborhood is left behind for another, then we can start to think about what is the future growth of the city. But I don't think that we're there right now. Even neighborhoods who have been long-time residents of the city of Houston have been left behind. And so it is, I believe, our commitment to ensure that we're going to take care of those who have been here, who've been paying their fair share, to ensure that we are lifting the city up as a whole.
Steve Costello.
Well, there's really no political will for increased annexations, and as a result of the Clear Lake Kingwood issue years ago, the state has changed the laws relative to annexation. So it's really a little bit, it's much more difficult for cities to just blanketly do an annexation. What the city of Houston has been doing, which is sort of an interesting concept, which is really, I wouldn't say I really fully support it, is they're doing a limited purpose annexation for the commercial tracts in some of these outlying areas to take advantage of a 1-cent sales tax revenue that is shared between the city and the MUD districts there, and they're allowed to use that money for other purposes, which is really benefiting the MUD districts as much as it is the city.
Bill King.
Yeah, I think this is one of the real governance conundrums of our region for our next generation. If you take the area that's unincorporated outside the city in Harris County and you made that its own city, it would be the second largest city in Texas, and it would be the 5th largest city in the United States after Houston. County government was never set up to govern this large an area and provide municipal services, and we've come up with this incredible patchwork of government entities that is highly inefficient. There's a lot of environmental issues as a result of that, and we've got to come up with a better model. We've either got to make annexation viable, or we've got to release these places to incorporate on their own, or we've got to change county government in some way where it can provide the service. But what we're doing is not working.
Ben Hall.
Now, annexation policies historically have been simply revenue grabs. We've been going out getting areas to increase the revenue flow into the city coffers. I'm disinclined to annex properties just for revenue grabs. We need to provide better services to those of you who live inside this city, and we can do so. We need to manage your money better, and we can do that as well. We need to provide you with better protection in this city. We will do that. Until we achieve those goals, we'll not annex new properties under Ben Hall administration.
Okay. I want to move on to the next question. Houston's economy relies on workers of all wage levels. What are your plans to ensure enough affordable workforce housing near employment centers and near transit to ensure we have enough housing to meet the needs of all income levels, especially low-wage workers?
You know, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, transit-oriented development. Get off of the transit lines, get off of the buses, get off of light rail, and walk to where you live, shop, work, and play. Transit-oriented development, I think, done strategically and done wisely, being done thoughtfully, will provide for that workforce housing. Will provide for, as I mentioned earlier, that as we talk about affordable housing, that's not the end all. We have to talk about that low-income housing. And that 24% are the folks who are most likely to be on buses and light rail. And so we have to make sure that that housing is immediately available to them. Otherwise, they're going to struggle to find that car. It's going to congest our roadways. And so being thoughtful about transit-oriented development. Live, walk, work, shop, and play.
Marty McVeigh.
Where's the jobs going to be? We don't have an economic development plan for the city of Houston. We don't know where people are going to live, where businesses are going to relocate and expand. It's foolish to think that we're just going to react, and that's what we continue to do in this city. We react, and we react too late. We need to be very proactive in our economic development expansion, so we are recruiting new businesses to come in areas where we want them to come. If we don't take a proactive role, then they wind up in Sugar Land, and they wind up in Pearland and Katy and other parts of the 10-county region.
Sylvester Turner. Oh, I'm sorry, Chris Bell, then Sylvester Turner.
As far as the underdeveloped areas go, you can be too proactive, because if you start focusing too much attention on an area, what makes them attractive to developers is that the land is cheap and they can build affordable housing, so long as the land is cheap. But if the city starts getting too much, shining too much light on an area, soon the price of land is going to increase and the whole plan goes off the track. So I think you have to be very careful in that regard. Transit is a different question, and we have this great geographic disparity, and I do think the city has to engage in that process and make sure that there's going to be affordable transit, especially for those trying to get back in the workforce.
Sylvester Turner.
Yeah. But you do need affordable housing in many of these neighborhoods, and you need workforce development housing. And housing and community development can redirect the resources that they are spending currently downtown when they're giving $15,000 a unit to developers downtown, and they're also giving some of that money to build hotels downtown. Those dollars can be better used in many of these areas that have been ignored for a long period of time. And then you also have to provide workforce development training. There are a lot of people who are still unskilled, and that's why you cannot talk about any of these things without also including your educational component.
I look at why we even talk about affordable housing. How about giving people jobs with livable wages? That's part of economic development. If we're gonna bring this on the table, then let's talk about the core issue. What's the root of this? I don't expect my friend Chris Bell, as a former member of Congress, to understand how to grow an economy, because Congress doesn't do that. The private sector does that. Government should clear the path and let business build the road and people build the road that they want. That's how to create a sustainable economy.
Yeah, but you're not going to achieve that if you're closing and consolidating schools in many of these most impoverished areas. That you have to provide the educational opportunities, and if you provide people with the educational opportunities and the tools, then they will then be equipped for those jobs. In this city, we're looking for plumbers. We're looking for welders. And so unless we partner with community colleges, unless we partner with our high schools, with our independent school districts, and give the people the tools that they need in order to meet today's challenges, we are still going to be missing the point.
No question about that.
fairness, Marty, since you mentioned Chris Bell, I'm going to give him a chance to comment, and then we're going to wrap up on this question.
Well, I do understand how government works, and I understand government's role. And I think when it comes to the underdeveloped areas, the best thing that the city of Houston can do is send a very loud signal to developers that if they're willing to take the risk and go into an underdeveloped area, then the city will back them up with infrastructure, tax abatements where appropriate, and other measures. And then more developers may be encouraged to follow after that. I think that's the best way to get some development started in these underserved areas.
Okay, the next question, this is for all of you and will be answered with a raised hand. Who used Metro to get here today? There's a follow-up.
It must be one of our board members that did that.
Did anyone use Metro last week? In the past month.
Ben, where did you take Metro?
Okay, well, wait.
Houston Zoo.
Yeah.
In the past month.
Past month.
Ever.
Ever?
Ever used Metro? Okay. The current mayor and council gave millions of dollars to Walmart, one of the largest corporations in the world, via 380 agreement to open a store in an area that opposed having a Walmart. What are you willing to commit to today if approached with a similar situation?
Can I respond to that since I was on council?
Well, Marty raised his hand first. Let him
I was
respond,
first,
then you
Steve.
Go ahead.
380 agreements are not economic development, and that's the bottom line. The reality with the Walmart deal is that Walmart put in substandard infrastructure when they were and didn't really complete the task. There is no enforcement in the city of Houston. We must make sure that anything that we're giving, whether it be tax abatement or 380 agreements or any other type of economic incentive to business, that there is follow-up and there is enforcement. And that's where we have a lack of follow-through, is that we don't enforce it. So I want to make sure that we have real economic development in this city, and that's not 380 agreements. We must have an office that goes after business to bring expansion into this city proper, not into the suburbs, but into the city, which brings rooftops, which brings revenue, which brings prosperity, which brings livable wages. We must have a complete economic development plan, not just 380 agreements all over the place.
All right, Steve Costello.
Well, actually, the 380 agreement was not given to Walmart. It was given to the developer, Einbinder. And if you go back and look at that particular site, which is south of I-10, it was actually an old, abandoned industrial area. And you look at it today, it is a Walmart and an incredible redevelopment all around the Walmart store. I actually walked in that entire neighborhood during that discussion process. And more than half of that neighborhood were excited that a Walmart was going to be there. This is actually about job creation. I mean, the underlying theme of economic development and the 380 agreement by state law is job creation. That's exactly what's going on out there. It's an incredible program. I look forward to it moving forward again in other areas of the city.
Adrian Garcia, then Chris Bell.
You know, I think that the challenge with that 380 agreement is that it was Walmart. I mean, an incredible conglomerate, and here we are giving our taxes away for that. I think we have to, play hardball in the appropriate occasions. If not for the 380 agreement, would Walmart not be there? I'm not sure about that. And so I think we have to be much more thoughtful about how we use those 380 agreements. I think we need to drive those 380 agreements in underserved areas so that we can expand the economy, so we can revitalize communities. I think we have to be much more strategic with the use of tax abatements and 380 agreements.
Well, you have to be smart about how you use them, but you have limited tools in the toolbox to begin with. And to say you're just going to throw one of those tools away when you're talking about trying to develop some of these underdeveloped areas, the city has to be in a position at some points to incentivize development. So you would certainly want to utilize those 380 agreements in certain instances. It would make no sense not to.
Sylvester Turner.
Thanks. And then I'm going to have to apologize there. I do have to attend a funeral that's in my legislative district this morning that started at 11. But I think all of the economic tools need to be used in a responsible fashion. What the city of Austin is now doing is that when people are coming for 380 agreements and others, they want to make sure that there is a return. For example, they want to make sure that if you're getting something from the city, that you're providing livable wages with decent benefits, that there are tangible returns that are being obtained. So I think anytime anyone is coming for the city for economic benefits, the city needs to have a clear definition of what it respects and what it will receive.
We were going straight to concluding statements, so do you want to just carry on with you, if you have any other concluding statement you wanted to make?
Let me applaud the Blueprint Houston for the work that you have done. I think it's very important for the general plan. I think is a first step, and it's important to make a first step as we deal with the fundamental segue into the future. I will just close with one example in my area that is one of those areas that's kind of been ignored for a long period of time. I went to the mayor several years ago. There was a park, West Little York Park, 29 acres of nothing, weeds and trees. I asked them to redo it because the people in my district couldn't go to Minute Maid. They said they didn't have the money. I said, if I raise the money and build the park out, will the city at least agree to maintain it? They said, we got a good deal. I raised the $2.6 million. We built the park out. It is now the second urban youth baseball academy in the country with 2,400 kids coming through that park every single year. As a result of that, Lone Star Community College built their college right down the street, and H-E-B stepped in and built a store on the other end. We have to see beyond what is in front of us. It does start with the general plan, then you have to get to the specifics, and it is about implementation and execution. And if given the opportunity, I look forward to working with you to realize those specifics. Thank you.
Marty McVeigh.
Thank you. I appreciate being here with all of you today, and the message that I'd like to convey to you is that give me a plan that is sustainable, that is doable, that is for the future of our city, that will take us to the next 100 years. Something that can be changed and representative of the people that we intend to serve, but it can be changed. And my role at USAID in building sustainable governments and sustainable nations you have to look at infrastructure. You've got to look at policing. You've got to look at roads, education, financial systems. You've got to look at best practices. That's how you build a nation. That's how you develop a nation and develop a city. And if this city ever stops developing, then we've lost. We've lost our economic edge. We've lost an ability to compete globally. I want to make sure that this city continues to grow in a smart way, that we are anticipating and fostering business growth in this city, that we are bringing jobs, that we are bringing new jobs, that we are bringing new revenue and new opportunities to this city. I'm Marty McVeigh, and I'll be issuing a paper on this just next week.
All right, Victoria Lane.
Okay. I think that we need to encourage and teach people how to open small businesses, because Walmart is pretty well off, you know. They don't need the money, and if they come in, they don't really pay the people that much. A lot of people complaining about their salary. So we need to teach people how to open small businesses so our economy can grow, and also improve our education and repair the roads. We need to fix the roads, and seriously, not just talking about it, we need to have an action doing it, because I drive all over city and there's so many potholes. And also employ the local contractors for government project, not outside of this city, just the locals, so it will also increase our revenue. And we also need to go green Houston, have a bike rail so we become healthy also. Health issue and tourism. You know, the Buffalo Bayou, we can make that like the same as river like San Antonio. So we can have a job for our younger generation. They come to me and says, hey, Victoria, I need a job. I'm bored, you know. And
Victoria, I do need you to wrap up.
Thank you, and my name is Victoria Lane.
Right,
and you can look at my website, victorialaneformayor.com. Thank you.
All right, Bill King.
Well, I agree with something that Victoria said earlier. She said we need to hire geniuses at City Hall, and we need to start at the mayor's office. Look, it's always a good idea to get a lot of smart people together and think about what's in our future, and certainly there's very little in the general plan that anyone can disagree with. But my concern is a shorter term, and that's the next 6 years, and I think we're facing some very difficult challenges. We've worked ourselves into quite a hole on the finances. We let our infrastructure get to a critical point. By the way, something we haven't discussed today, we have a huge issue coming up with our wastewater treatment system you're going to hear more about in the coming months. And I'm concerned that we're going to be dealing with these problems without the luxury of the incredible boom that we've had for the last 6 years, or the last 10 years, really. I don't know if you know this, but 3 of the 4 last month, the sales tax receipts for the city of Houston have been down. It's the first time that's happened since 2009. With oil prices where they are today and Goldman Sachs predicting they're going into the 20s, I'm concerned about the future. We need a steady hand on the wheel for the next 6 years.
Ben Hall.
Let me again thank you for those of you who participated in putting together the general plan. It is a great plan, and City Council must and should approve it. Let me say this. Second, we need a mayor who understands the priorities that have to be immediately addressed. One is our fiscal challenges at City Hall, and you need someone who can address those without raising your taxes, especially when we can find $538 million or $35 million in TERS over the next 4 years to bring back into the general fund. That's a solution without raising your taxes. You need a mayor who's also going to address the issues of public safety. We can't have a great city if we don't have streets that we can drive on and ride on and have our bicycles on. We can't live in a city where people are endangered and without proper policing. We have to have these as priorities. As the next mayor of the city of Houston, I intend to do so, make this a safer city for you, a more mobile city for you. My name is Ben Hall. I need your vote.
Adrian Garcia.
Thank you, and once again, I applaud you and your work in providing us a general plan. I'm Adrian Garcia, and I want to be your mayor, because I want to be the mayor that has a general plan that can help guide us to our tomorrow. And when you have the input of citizens who have provided hours upon hours, and you've done it all for the money, but given us your perspective on what and how we can get to tomorrow in a much better, much more effective, much more prosperous way, then this mayor wants to adopt your plan and work closely with you. This city has given me incredible opportunity. It's allowed me to work for you for the last 35 years as a police officer, as a member of council, where Mayor White chose me as his mayor pro tem, and as your sheriff, where I've led, managed, and reformed a major organization. I want to make sure that our plan keeps alive the spirit of opportunity that has always been Houston. I'm Adrian Garcia, and I'm respectfully asking for your vote.
Steve Costello.
Thank you. I'm your at-large council member, but I'm also an engineer, a problem solver, and a successful businessman. Ask yourself who best to deliver the infrastructure to the community than an engineer. Ask yourself who best to resolve some of the financial issues facing the city of Houston than a businessman, a successful businessman. The issues I believe that are stressing the city right now are going to be an integral part of our general plan, which is obviously infrastructure investments, it's investments in public safety, and it's resolving the financial crisis that we have facing us moving forward. Again, I'm the at-large council member. I represent all of the city of Houston. And I'm Stephen Costello. My goal is to move Houston forward, not going backwards. I want to thank Blueprint Houston for organizing this event today. I enjoyed the conversation, and I look forward to being your next mayor. And I'm here today to respectfully ask you and the viewing audience for your vote. My name is Stephen Costello. Thank you very much.
Chris Bell.
In closing, I'd like to share one of the core principles from the general plan. Communicate clearly and with transparency the actions under there. Provide information to the public in formats they can use and understand. Leverage technology effectively to engage the community. Use public engagement to better understand community needs and interests in order to develop sound public policy. Use metrics to gauge success in achieving community goals. Enable individuals with diverse backgrounds to fully participate in city activities. I share that because that is basically my eHouston plan. That is why I've been so focused on technology these past few months. Because of the advancements in technology, we are able to modernize in ways that were unthinkable back when I was serving as a member of the Houston City Council. My ideas that I put forth during this campaign jibe very well with the general plan. I applaud what you have done, and I look forward to planning and growing and building a more modern city right along with you. I'm Chris Bell. It's bellformayor.com. Thanks for allowing me to be here today.
Now I'll ask all of our candidates to stay seated for just another minute. Same thing with our audience. One mayoral candidate on the ballot who did not meet organizers' criteria to appear at today's forum is here today, and the organizers determined that it was appropriate to offer him a minute to speak, so we're going to give him that minute. This is Dale Steffies.
Thank you very much, and thanks to Plan Houston. I've been with them a long time. I do not want to be mayor of Houston. Let me say that again. I do not want to be mayor of Houston with the way that things are going right now. I want people to go to my vision of what it is of Houston, and I ask you to find out about it. One of the things, I'm a professional planner. I've been a planner for 40 years. I worked with the Chamber of Commerce, not the Greater Houston, the Chamber of Commerce, when we planned Houston in the late 60s and the 70s and early 80s, and we did a hell of a good job. That's one of the reasons Houston is so great today. My company is Planning and Forecasting Consultants, and I survived the 80s. I do energy forecasting mostly, and so that's there. And I'm candidates. I'm welcome to see you. I've never seen you before. Anyway, I'm real happy to be here, and I thank you. My red light's up. God bless you. I do not want planning unless you want to join my group.
And with that, I'd like to ask all of the candidates to stand, and I ask all of you to give a round of applause to our mayoral candidates. Thanks also to the organizers of today's event, and thank you all for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Adriana. All right, senor. It was pretty cool.
Crap.
Let me go to this funeral then.
I wouldn't.
All right.
Oh, go. Sir? Yes. Yes.